I, of course, think the difficulty might be Devoted Druid and Vizier of Remedies are a combo, but Elk plus Elk is not a combo.
Well, that I can't argue with that. One of the key cards here that we're going to be seeing is Giver of Runes. So that's a card that actually provides a layer of protection against cards like Oko because it makes it difficult to actually interact with the combo that Clutter's trying to present here at sorcery speed.
All right, turn 1, Birds of Paradise from Clutter. Yeah, all the cards are just tutoring. We also have Ranger Captain of Eos added to the list, another card that can just tutor up different pieces here. That one tutor would, I believe, then tutor up Giver of Runes.
Right, and you can also see some nods that are more than subtle to Oko, like Phyrexian Revoker and Deputy of Detention in Clutter's main deck.
See, with Ranger Captain, it's already a 3/3 for 3. If you elk it, it's just a 3/3. We do see turn 1 Collins with his own mana accelerant. The Simic Wurza deck is a 4 Gilded Goose deck. This is the same list. We see Collins at 8-1. It really has been dominant here. Our 9-0 player, Berterioni, and Edgar Magallanes, 8-1 on the same list.
And this is the big worry if you're on Clutter's side of the battlefield, is that Oko is going to come down before you can develop your combo pieces and get to untap with them or Giver of Runes.
Right, Giver of Runes and Devoted Druid here together. Once Matt untaps, he's Oko-proof. But it is this turn, especially with Gilded Goose, that he has to be worried that the Planeswalker will just show up.
Right, and there's a point where common heuristics tell us that we should develop our mana creatures on the first turn when possible. If Clutter had had a Giver of Runes, if he had known about something like Gilded Goose, he may have wanted to develop that on the first turn, but this is what makes the Simic deck so strong, is it's much more consistent at cranking out turn 2 Okos.
Yeah. I mean, on Matt's side, it's really hard to not play Birds of Paradise on turn 1 when you have it.
Right, and against the normal play patterns of these Oko decks, it's fine. This would be a perfectly serviceable opening.
Yeah, you might be a bit vulnerable to Mox Opal, but that's it, and that, that's a much smaller risk you're taking.
But look, without a Mox Opal, now Mullins isn't going to have enough mana for Oko.
Right, so we see Arkham's Astrolabe from Collins. If he has Opal and the Oko, it could happen, but I don't think it's going to.
Ooh.
And with this Devoted Devastation deck, it is not messing around. We see Emery from Collins. Matt, all he has to untap with here to make infinite mana is one of his 3 Vizier of Remedies, 4 Eladamri's Calls, 4 Finale of Devastations, or maybe a Ranger Captain of Eos.
And I think Clutter has the combo in his hand. Now that
he has so much redundancy. It'd be hard for him not to.
Right. If Mullen doesn't have interaction right now, he literally loses the game.
We see Eladamri's Call and Duskwatch Recruiter in Matt's hand. That should just do it. Right, here's Eladamri's Call. Find any creature, put it in your hand. Cast Vizier. Make a lot of mana, cast this Duskwatch Recruiter, win.
Right, and we just see Collins basically saying, okay, do you have an actual way to kill me?
So, Vizier plus Devoted Druid. This was the backbone of the deck. It creates infinite green mana. And infinite green mana, I hear, is good with Duskwatch Recruiter. Let's get all the creatures in our deck, put them in our hand.
I think Collins is basically saying, show me the walking ballista.
Yeah, I think what Collins wants to know is, well, what card is it that you're going to kill me with? And he says, it's Walking Ballista. And Collins says, fair enough. So game 1, Matt Clutter, and you were asked how he's at 8-1, and this is exactly it.
Right, and that's a situation where Collins kind of didn't know the rules of engagement going in and didn't know that if he didn't have that turn 2 Oko, he literally lost the game.
And I'm really impressed here from Matt's side on how he has adapted his deck to, I think, what we've just seen as a changing format. Devoted Druid traditionally was a collected company deck. So it's a deck with a combo, but had a value game plan, would be good against removal spells, things like that. But no one's playing removal spells anymore. There isn't, we aren't trying to beat Jeskai, like Colonnade decks and Jund decks anymore. You're trying to beat Wurza. So you see this deck, there's no collected companies even in the list. All the cards are just mana dorks for 1, combo pieces, and cards that tutor for your combo piece. That is the whole deck.
Right, so something that these Wurza decks have kind of leaned into is that a lot of their artifacts are basically just air. And what that means is they're cards that don't really do very much except provide real estate. They are Arkham's Astrolabe, Moxen, etc., cards that clog up the battlefield to make your Urza good, but if you're dying before the Urza portion of the game, that is just not good enough. You can't spend time on these Astrolabes.
So Matt showing off here in game 1. Now, and you said if you haven't had a chance at Star City Games to head over to check out our weekly sale, we do a different sale each week on our store. Right now, we have a big sale on non-English singles. That's going on through Tuesday. We're giving you an extra day to check that one out. What are your thoughts? Favorite foreign language cards?
Oh, gosh. Okay, so I really like Russian cards. The Cyrillic alphabet just looks great, I think.
Yeah.
The letter for the phonetic that makes a f sound is a circle with a vertical line through it.
It's like a
so
feed.
Anything that starts with Phyrexian actually looks like it starts with the Phyrexian symbol.
Oh,
so
that's really nice.
I have a Russian Phyrexian Arena and a Russian Phyrexian Metamorph just for Commander because they look super flavorful.
Does that mean they cost less?
Well, Metamorph does.
So Matt on game 1. We're going to look over at some sideboard options. This is a straight race. It felt like game 1. Now they're going to have some options in these games going forward. Do any of them matter?
So the things that I would be looking at on Mullen's side, he has the most to adjust here. You can't just have all this air, all these slow counter spells like Cryptic Command. Fatal Push, obviously going to be incredible here.
It's a creature combo deck. This kills I think every creature in Matt's deck.
Right. Pithing Needle is something that's not necessarily going to turn off Devoted Druid's mana ability, but it turns off the untap ability.
Okay.
Which is a way to sort of preempt the combo and feel safer tapping out while developing your own strategy.
That's actually interesting because the Devoted... we were going to say counters company deck. Can't really call it that anymore. There's no company in it. Because it doesn't have as much of a fair game plan. I think in the past I didn't like things like Pithing Needle against the deck because you play Pithing Needle and then they just end up companying into... Yeah, those like company into like Ralliers and Kitchen Finks or something like that, beat you up. I actually think it's pretty good now because this idea that Matt's going to just chip you for 20 damage, I don't really think his deck is capable of that.
Right, and it's also good against a lot of the fair options that Matt has access to. It's good against Ballista. It's great against Duskwatch Recruiter. It plays against enough of these cards, the backup plans, even Oko, that you're probably interested in having the card in your deck.
So we do see on Collins, I think he can slow it down a bit. On Matt's side, I don't know that I want to change too much. He has Unified Will, a card that should be a hard counter in this matchup, but I don't even know if I want him to bring them in. It feels like he's a bit of a favorite until something changes in the landscape.
Right, and there's even a point where the games that you lose, Unified Will probably isn't saving you. The big reason for that is just because Collins is likely going to be more interactive in post-board games and has things like Gilded Goose that just incidentally flood the battlefield. So it isn't even necessarily reliable that you're going to be up enough creatures and mana to lean into it. The big thing on a Clutter side I would be interested in are those Veil of Summers. They're going to be good against counter spells, and they're sort of a stifle for an Oko activation, where Mullen may have thought that was a safe way to put the shields down since it was interactive.
Well, Collins will be on the play here for game 2. Again, did feel like there was an Oko check there. Game 1, Collins did not pass it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's kind of the game you have to play with these combo decks a lot of the time is if you don't have a great way to protect your cards, instead of trying to find one, just say, okay, who's dead?
See in Matt's hand, looks like some Deputy of Detention was brought in. Actually has one of those in the main, but decided to keep it here. His deck also does have some Planeswalkers in it, 3 copies of Teferi Time Raveler, and 1 Oko of his own.
Right, and it looks like Clutter keeping this hand signals that he's prepared to play a more mid-rangey game post-board. He doesn't have any combo pieces. He has a Teferi, Veil of Summer. It feels like it's a little bit too good to throw back just because it has a bunch of good cards in it, but it does signal that he is not as desperate for combo pieces.
Yeah, I was so skeptical of the hand at first and him trying to play the game that way, but then looking at Collins' hand, it looks like there is a pair of Fatal Push in the opener. I think Matt's going to really be rewarded for keeping this kind of start.
Right, this is a game that Teferi is kind of primed to take over.
Yeah. Now, until that happens, I think we're going to see some trading. Matt's starting here on Windswept Heath. Looks like he's going to go for a turn 1 Giver of Runes. I can't imagine he'll get to untap with this.
No, I would be surprised if that were the case. And it's possible he just leads on Hierarch in order to try and turn to this Teferi as well.
That makes sense.
All kinds of lines.
Whatever 1-drop it is, it'll probably get pushed. But
Yeah.
but that's, I think, what I like about the start, right? Okay, it'll be 1-drop, Fatal Push, 1-drop, Fatal Push, Teferi.
Yeah.
Now we're playing.
Exactly, and there's a point where on Mullen's side you kind of have to go, well, are these pushes good enough? I have to have them in, but...
If you're just what Collins wants to do is defend from the combo with the Fatal Pushes. Because remember, Collins isn't actually a Jund deck. It's not removal spell into removal spell into removal spell. It's the removal spells are more defense or disruption as opposed to a game plan.
Right. It's definitely a spot where he's trying to pick apart specific cards rather than actually tax Clutter's raw resource count.
Because of that, I actually think there's an option where Collins, though he has the Fatal Push, doesn't Fatal Push a Noble Hierarch.
I think it's pretty close here. It may be that he thinks it's better to do it just because he has 2 copies of Fatal Push.
Yeah, with 1 copy, he might hold it back. With 2, I agree. Unless there's just like a really good 2-mana play that he just wants to do instead, which I think Emery counts for.
Yeah, absolutely. This is sort of a card advantage engine for Mullen to go ahead and develop here. And the sooner you develop those, the more advantage they accumulate over time and so on.
Emery bins 4 cards, one of them being Oko. Mox Opal also. We'll be happy to get that one back next turn with Emery. Emery's secretly one of the better cards they printed here.
Medium take, top 10 creatures of all time.
There are some pretty busted artifacts in Magic.
Yeah.
And Emery is good with all of them.
Yeah.
So, the downside is that when you don't kill the turn 1 Hierarch, sometimes your opponent makes a turn 2 3-mana play. And in this case, Teferi Time Raveler bouncing Emery seems pretty darn good. That's going to be Matt's play.
Yeah, and this is a spot where you feel pretty good about this because you just ate Mullen's entire turn 2.
Mullen's hoping for an Oko here. Would be if he can somehow get a green mana and an Oko and elk up that Astrolabe, this should be a great turn.
Now, this engineered explosives that Mullen drew is quite good against Clutter because it is a type of interaction that Clutter's going to struggle defending against. It checks several boxes. It gets around Giver of Runes. It gets around Teferi, making things only interact at sorcery speed. And then on top of all of that, Emery can even recast it from the graveyard.
I think that's really interesting. So, because it's not a collected company deck anymore, I think you're right. I remember I used to play Amulet Bloom but Amulet Titan against this deck. And Engineer Explosives is one of your main ways to kill creatures, but it was always scary having explosives on 2 because they might have a Devoted Druid in play, and then they'd cast Collected Company, and I'd think, man, I have to just blow up this, I have to just 1-for-1 with it. I can't wait until the combo happens because I might lose at instant speed.
Right.
And now that the deck doesn't play at instant speed like that, I think you can actually leverage the explosives a lot better.
Right, and the other side of that is if you let Clutter untap with something like a Teferi, Teferi can just roll up and then cast a Finale of Devastation at instant speed.
Yeah. So 3rd land here from Collins. It's not green, so no chance to Oko.
Well, there is an Arkham's Astrolabe.
Yeah, but then you can't attack with it if you're making green.
It's just bad value, really.
Collins will recast the Emery. 4 more cards into the graveyard. He would have liked to get that Mox Opal, but Teferi had other ideas.
Nah, just give it a second.
It'll happen. Looks like a Bauble added to the graveyard for Emery. Extra points on for Collins, I think, for a very tidy graveyard.
Look, you can tell he's played with Emery before this match.
Every card is perpendicular to every card. We can see the name of every single card. Just A+. Great work.
And this is a spot where we were talking about how ahead Clutter was a moment ago. It doesn't even feel that way anymore.
Yeah, but it'll push on the Hierarch.
He had a nice tempo play, but this is kind of the drawback of keeping a hand like the one he did.
Yeah.
Is there's not really much that you can follow up a Teferi with if you aren't comboing.
Well, and I think you're right. This Devoted Devastation deck, unlike Counters Company, doesn't really play a fair game well.
Right.
A Counters Company deck might make this Teferi, and then next turn who knows, a Kitchen Finks, a Spell Queller, I don't know, some sort of value card. Just, maybe like would go turn 4 Shalai, and then just start like doing gross attack things. Like, now Matt's follow-up is just more 1-drops, because that's all his deck is now.
Right, he really needs to find Ranger, Captain of Eos, that Shalai you mentioned, something like that off the top of his library here, or this is going to get away from him. Especially now that Mullen has been able to untap with this copy of Emery. Just something like Engineered Explosives on 3 would be so brutal, or Engineered Explosives for 1, crack it for 1 would be so brutal here.
I mean, and your take on Emery is, I just agree with, look at this. The baseline play is that Emery right now can either tap to Rampant Growth or tap to draw a card.
It's better than Rampant Growth. It's an untapped mana source.
Yeah, okay, an untapped, right. It's it's more like a Tribe Scout or something like that.
Yeah,
Yeah. I think it's in the hand for Collins. Just want to point out some more Eldraine additions here. Drown in the Lock out of the sideboard of these decks.
So that just means he has a wall of removal and an Emery that's threatening to just cantrip and or create more removal every turn.
And I love this innovation we've seen out of Simic Wurza. It's taking on these Eldraine cards and at a very low investment allows this deck that's a combo deck, but also Wurza's almost more of a mid-range deck with a combo finish to play a fair game. One thing I saw yesterday watching Edgar play this at the 7-0 bracket, he took a game post sideboard and just started leaning on cryptic commands plus their copies of Mystic Sanctuary, and then just started playing a very fair game.
Look how brutal this is. Mystic Sanctuary putting Fatal Push back on top of the library.
Right. And this is out of a deck that, you used to be a combo deck.
Yeah.
And you're like, no, just kidding. I'm going to play. I mean, we talked about how we've seen these Sultai Drown in the Lock decks. I mean, Collins has a Drown in the Lock. He has a Cryptic. He has a Mystic Sanctuary. He's kind of just playing that deck.
Yeah, he just needs to find a way to deal with this Teferi, and it's hard to imagine him losing the game from here.
Yeah, okay, there's no end to the story, but Emery's doing a good card advantage impression here.
Oh, absolutely. It's drawn at least 1 card at this point.
Yeah, it still taps to draw a card.
Right.
Okay, it seems great. Engineer Explosives on 1 cleans up the board. That Teferi we talked about is good here, but yeah, if you want to go, this Wurza deck's just so impressive. It feels like if you want to go toe-to-toe in a fair game, you need to be playing Jund or Jeskai to have a chance here.
Mm-hmm.
Plus from Teferi. Birds of Paradise back on the board. And a pass, but Emery can just keep recasting these explosives.
Right. That was a Revoker on top.
Okay.
That Mishra's Bauble revealed.
So what do you revoke? I mean, if Collins...
Probably Emery.
If you revoke Emery, it's hard, right? So but what Collins could do is if he has no answer, Emery could just make an EE for 2 right now, and then says, well, would you like to revoke my explosives or my Emery? Thoughtseize from Collins. Veil of Summer, good answer from Matt. Collins can't react here because Teferi's been plussed. So that will happen. And now the Revoker is in Matt's hand. So, Emery will get an Astrolabe back from the graveyard. It is another way to tap to draw a card. That one gives you the card right away. Here's another Astrolabe. Everything about this Wurza deck. There's a reason it's 9-0, 8-1, 8-1, 8-1 at the tournament.
Exactly. A lot of this is just about developing as much cardboard as you can, because Urza turns all of these cards into more mana sources.
This deck it can race the combo decks. It can grind out as a fair deck. It is really powerful.
And it just sideboards seamlessly into these black cards.
Its sideboard's great.
Yeah.
Yeah. It sideboards like a Jund deck.
Exactly.
I would go so far as to say I suspect this deck improves its matchup post-board in every matchup. or if close to it. If not every matchup, it's it's got that Jund
It's
thing
got to
where
feel close.
that was one of the advantages to playing Jund, right? Game 1 was always tough, but game 2 always got better.
Exactly. You're 45% most game ones or 50% most game ones, and then 60% post sideboard.
Yeah. Phyrexian Revoker down for Matt. He does name Emery. But for Collins' side, he's not even playing this combo deck anymore. You see Fatal Push, Drown in the Lock, Cryptic Command in his hand. So there's still a Teferi in play, to be fair. But as soon as that Teferi's gone, I think Collins is off to the races. Fatal Push on Revoker. Matt protects it with a second Veil of Summer. Draws Deputy Detention, but look at this board. What do you even Deputy here? The Astrolabes.
You could hopefully draw something better to do.
All right, that is the plan. Waterlogged Grove, get in the graveyard. Draws his third Veil of Summer. That will probably be good. But Matt, he needs to find his combo now. His deck is not built to play turn 7 of a game.
Right.
-3 from Teferi. Is he even bouncing something?
Don't believe so.
No, just needs a card. Okay, Eladamri's called that as a card.
That's a hot one.
But he needs 2 cards right now. So a lot of times when you play wild card tutors, like you're calling it a wild card, kind of like a joker in a card game, right? You want to wait until you know which half you need.
Right.
I love it. We do see. I was wondering if we would see this play. You really need to hope. This is so risky. What happens if Collins just Cryptic bounces the Deputy? There's not Veil of Summer mana up. Oh no, wait, birds.
Bird.
Okay.
This is
that Deputy is so.
You're
just saying to your opponent, I'm losing if you get rid of this.
This is running with scissors.
Love it. Yeah. Look, I'm not gonna trip, okay? That's not something I do. It's fine.
What kind of person just goes out there and trips?
Yeah. It's like juggling knives. Like, look, I'm gonna catch the handle, okay? It's fine.
I might have been more interested in just hitting Emery.
I understand there's already a Revoker on it.
Yeah, it's just a little bit of insulation against the card advantage engine.
Did you want to Deputy the Emery and then use Teferi to bounce the Revoker and reset it?
No.
Okay.
No,
you just wanted to just really get that Emery gone.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like that's the biggest card advantage engine for Collins at this point.
So Drown in the Lock. All right. Third Veil of Summer. Look at a smile on Collins' face.
Yep. What else would it be?
And remember, that gives creatures hexproof from blue, so even if Collins has land Cryptic here, it's no good.
Oof.
For a turn. That is the last Veil. That's the third Veil of Summer Collins has seen. We know that it's the last one in Matt's deck. Teferi pluses. Matt says go.
So he has an Eladamri's Call in his hand. This, to me, smells like a finale of Devastation. So he rolled up his Teferi.
Right, it's a sorcery, so he can instant speed the finale.
He can cast it on Mullen's Instep, and right now, there's actually this cool dynamic where there are now 2 not Teferi permanents that Mullen is interested in interacting with. And because of that, he's more likely to go after those and then let Clutter do something with his Teferi, and if he gets to go Instep finale for one of the permanents.
So Fatal Push starts here, targeting Revoker. And you're absolutely right. Here's the finale Devastation. Is he getting Shalai? Oh, I love this. Oh, counter that. This is so good. Matt is just breaking out all the stops here. This
Shalai is strong.
I love how just every turn Matt's things have hexproof. Veil of Summer, Veil of Summer, Veil of Summer. Khan's like, well, you're out of those, right? Yeah. Shalai.
All right, yeah, that sorcery is good.
All right. What does Collins do? He has a Cryptic command, but that doesn't do anything.
Yeah, at this point, I see some other artifacts hiding out in hand. It may just be a turn where he wants to try and develop.
I think it's he's
can't
going to
even
lose.
he can't even cast Thopter Foundry here.
No, he has Cryptic Command, Metallic Rebuke, Thopter Foundry, and one other. I think Collins is about to lose.
Well, without a way to haste Devoted Druid.
Right, it's just Eladamri's call, and that can't do it.
Right.
Are we getting to the point where just beatdowns like 6 mana hit you? Is that becoming a thing?
So there's a combo. Sort of. It's not the same way that the Devoted Druid combo works, but I believe I see a Ranger Captain of Eos hiding out in Clutter's hand.
Okay.
You Ranger Captain of Eos, get Giver of Runes.
Okay.
Cast Giver of Runes, and then on Mullen's upkeep, sacrifice your Ranger Captain of Eos.
Okay, that when I do that, then your opponent can't cast non-creature spells.
Correct.
I like that.
So what that means is Clutter will get to untap with Teferi, Giver, Shalai.
All right, well, Collins, because the Teferi's in play, main phase, counter, bounce, draw on Shalai. Well, can't really be on much else.
Yeah, the idea here is there just isn't much that this Cryptic's doing for you. You might as well, while you can't use the mana, try to get something out of it.
Collins acknowledging here that Teferi isn't going anywhere in the, probably before the game ends. So might as well cycle. Cast Mox Opal, but Matt is doing a great job of just neutralizing him.
I want to give credit to Clutter here. So, at the beginning of this game, we weren't sure that this could hang.
Yeah.
But because he's been able to keep this Imri in check, it feels like this is turned around.
Yeah, I think he's going to get this. Now, to be fair, and this shows off the strength of Urza, Matt needed a whole lot of tools. He needed all 3 of his Veil of Summers out of the sideboard, all to convert to get to this point. Which speaks to, you really need to bring the kitchen sink if you want to fight this Urza deck. But I think he's showing that if you do, there's a win to be had here.
Sure. On the other hand, it kind of felt like Mullen just also drew a bunch of sideboard cards. Yeah,
Mullen's going in. He's definitely kept a hand and sideboarded in a way to say, I'm going to play control. 2 Knight Captains from Matt.
And it looks like he's shortcutting a fetch here.
Okay, yeah. I was like, why? 5 mana? No, it's 6. Pair of 3/3s. Gets Giver of Runes, Giver of Runes. So I don't think we're comboing here, are we?
No, I think we're trying to sort of build a house of cards.
Well, yeah, those cards are called Giver of Runes.
Yeah, exactly. And now you just have this situation where you get to Knight Captain on Mullen's upkeep, and then you guarantee untapping with Giver of Runes.
So you're sacrificing. This isn't attacking yet. You're sacrificing these?
Correct. And then next turn you have Shalai, Giver of Runes, to have this sort of unbreakable anti-spot removal package.
Yeah, I think what's the only piece left to cover then is Engineered Explosives.
Right.
Let's see if it works. I like this. Upkeep sacrifices one of them. No non-creature spells for Collins this turn.
Nothing from Mullen.
Well, I think his only creature was another Emery.
Right. No, I'm not saying it's necessarily his fault, but that's the strength of Knight Captain of Eos.
Well, I like this lock that Matt has put together between Teferi, Time Raveler, and Knight Captain of Eos. It reminds me of these green-white Hate Bears decks where you're just eventually you get to a point where your opponent just can't do anything.
This is the power of something like Teferi in these fair decks. When you need to be able to interact at instant speed, Teferi just completely shuts down that avenue.
So, 1 Ranger Captain has been sacrificed. See, there's that second ability there. He's using that in conjunction with Teferi to lock Collins off while he sets up the board he wants. We see Shalai. We see another Giver of Runes. So all the creatures have hexproof, except for Shalai, which now is going to have 2 Giver of Runes protecting it. It really just means Engineered Explosives is the only way Collins can ever touch these things.
Feels like it is about time to get busy here.
You want to start attacking?
Yeah.
Certainly once he gets to untap with that Shalai second ability. 6 mana, give all the creatures a 1/1 counter. Once you have 7 creatures in play, that is a pretty appealing option.
Oh, yeah.
Remember, this is all, there's still an Eladamri's Call hanging out in Matt's hand, too. You know, at this point, it might just be a walking ballista played fairly. I guess you could get a revoker.
Well, I think there's, let's see, Gaddock-Teeg.
Gaddock-Teeg.
If he
That
brings
stops
in
engineered
Gaddock-Teeg, that
explosives.
covers engineered explosives and is probably the final lock piece for Clutter.
Yeah, there's also, looks like there's a collector oof in his sideboard. That also would cover a lot of Collins' deck.
Yeah, it's really, it just kind of feels like,
This is nice.
yeah, it's hard to imagine the door not closing for Mullen here in maybe one turn cycle.
Thopter Foundry for Collins. It's interesting. Thopter Foundry and Sword of the Meek, both one-ofs in Collins' deck this weekend.
And it looks like he's just kind of desperation creating blockers here.
It's actually a deviation here with Simic Wurza. We've seen the Bertarioni and Edgar Magalhaes are both playing Simic Wurza. These players worked together for the event.
Yes.
But did come up for some slight differences. Whereas Bertarioni and Edgar are on the same 75. Collins, a little bit different. So Collins has still kept Thopter Foundry Sword of the Meek in his deck.
Right.
Whereas on Edgar's side is actually completely off the combo.
And would you look at that? It's Collector Oof.
Well, so that combo we were talking about might have some problems.
Nice Thopter Foundry.
Yeah. And, you know, the hate bears here. We've seen this strategy, I think, in Legacy, somewhat in Modern. Once Mother of Runes was in Legacy, and now we're going to start seeing it in Modern with Giver of Runes, where you get the hate bear that KOs your opponent, you protect it with a Giver of Runes, you protect that with something else, and eventually your opponent just can't play cards.
You know, I got to be honest. Do you think Clutter just boarded out the combo? We have not seen a Vizier or a Druid in, 20 cards?
That's really interesting. I would love to ask him about it.
Like maybe Druid stays in because it's a mana creature, but overall, this has just kind of looked like a green-white creature deck with Teferi and Deputy of Detention. This has been impressive stuff on Clutter's side.
He certainly knows the matchup.
We got to give him props. He knows what is going on.
If he's boarding out the combo here, it's a bold statement for the matchup. I certainly could see him shaving numbers on the combo.
And it may just think that it's not reliable when you're on the draw against an Oko deck. You can't just jam a Druid and expect it to work out.
Certainly in traditional Counters Company matchups, when your opponent is just boarding in a stack of Fatal Pushes and other removal spells, the combo gets worse.
Yeah, you don't want to ever draw a Malira.
Right, you don't want to draw that. I mean, but I didn't know if that's an option for his deck because he doesn't have Kitchen Finks anymore. The only value no combo game plan may not be a thing, but you're right, it's working out here.
Yeah, let's see. So we have 1 Oof, 3 Veil of Summer, Gaddock-Teeg, 2 Oko, and a Vivian. Could be 8 cards for 8 cards.
It could be, yeah, and then you'd board out something like 3 Vizier, some number of Devoted Druids. You might get rid of things like Gilded Goose as well at that point. And here's a swing. At this point, Thopters are on chump block duty. Matt gonna just continue to tick up that Teferi. He does not. I guess he doesn't really have. He's gonna just draw a card. He doesn't have any sorceries left to quicken. Emery still stuck under that Phyrexian Revoker. Yeah, nothing is changing. There's 6 mana up for Matt. It's going to be an end step, pump the team, untap, pump the team again, and that might just be all 14. Yeah,
wow.
DC Collins, nothing he can do. And how about this for a deck in the Oko field? Matt Clutter, a clean 2-0, moves to 9-1.
So it's easy to look at that game and go,